My fiancé's mother took my hand at dinner and told me I wasn't good enough to marry her son. We were sitting in the private dining room of the Pemberton Club, the most exclusive establishment in Charlotte, where memberships were inherited rather than purchased, and the waitstaff had served the same families for generations. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over white linen tablecloths. Oil paintings of founding members lined the walls. Everything about the room whispered old money and older secrets. I had been dating Marcus Morrison for 2 years. He had proposed 3 months ago, on a balcony overlooking the city, with a ring that sparkled like a promise. I had said yes with tears in my eyes, believing I had found my happily ever after. Now I was meeting his parents for the first time. They had been traveling during our entire relationship, always in Europe, always unavailable, always represented by Marcus's apologetic explanations about their busy schedule. I had found it strange, but not alarming. Some families were like that, I told myself. Some parents were distant. But the moment Eleanor Morrison took my hand across the dinner table, I understood that their absence hadn't been coincidental. It had been strategic. "Tell me about your family, dear," Eleanor said, her grip firm, her smile cold. "Marcus has been so vague about your background." "There's not much to tell," I said carefully. "I grew up in foster care. I don't have family in the traditional sense." Eleanor's eyes flickered, something calculating, something hungry. "No parents? No siblings?" "No one at all. No one." She exchanged a glance with her husband, Richard, who sat at the head of the table like a king surveying his domain. Something passed between them, a silent communication I couldn't interpret. Then Eleanor smiled. Not warmly, triumphantly. "Perfect," she said. "We don't marry girls with no family." I felt the words land like a slap. "I'm sorry. We don't marry girls with no family." She repeated it slowly, as if I hadn't understood. "Girls with families ask questions. They have expectations. They make demands. But you," her grip on my hand tightened, "you have no one to ask questions on your behalf." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "I don't understand." "You will, dear." Eleanor released my hand and gestured to a waiter who appeared with a leather folder. "But first, let's discuss the prenuptial agreement. My name is Vivian Okafor. I am 29 years old. And everything I told Eleanor Morrison about being an orphan was a lie. My parents, Chukwemeka and Ada Ora Okafor, are very much alive. They built one of the most successful hedge funds on the East Coast, managing over $4.2 billion in assets. My brother is a federal prosecutor. My sister runs the charitable foundation our family established to support foster children, a cause close to our hearts because my mother spent her first years in America in the foster system before being adopted by a Nigerian-American family. I am not an orphan. I am an heiress. And I had spent the last 2 years pretending to be poor to test whether Marcus Morrison loved me for who I was or for what I had. Now I was about to get my answer. I need to tell you how this test began. I met Marcus at a coffee shop near Duke University, where I was completing my MBA. He was handsome, charming, and seemed genuinely unimpressed by the usual markers of status that surrounded him. "I don't care about money," he told me on our second date. "I grew up with it, and I've seen what it does to people. Makes them shallow. Makes them calculate every relationship in terms of what they can get. I want something real." It was exactly what I wanted to hear. And that made me suspicious. I had been burned before by men who claimed to love me but were really courting my family's fortune. Men who seemed perfect until they discovered that my modest lifestyle was a choice, not a constraint. Men who transformed the moment they realized what I was worth. So when Marcus Morrison appeared in my life with his old money name and his claims of wanting something real, I decided to test him. I told him I was a scholarship student working part-time to cover expenses. I wore clothes from thrift stores. I drove a car I had bought used for $3,000. I lived in a small apartment that I had rented specifically for this purpose, far from the penthouse my family owned in downtown Charlotte. I became the version of myself that had nothing but her own merit. And Marcus seemed to love that version. He paid for dinners without making me feel inadequate. He defended me when his friends made comments about my simple lifestyle. He proposed with a ring I knew he couldn't really afford on his salary, a gesture that seemed to prove his sincerity. For 2 years, I believed I had found someone who loved me for me. Now, sitting in this private dining room, watching his parents lay out their plans like predators circling prey, I was beginning to understand the truth. The prenuptial agreement was 53 pages long. Eleanor slid it across the table with the practiced ease of someone who had done this before. "Standard protections," she said. "Just formalities. I'm sure you understand." I looked at the document without reading it. I had seen enough legal paperwork in my life to know that 53 pages was not standard for a prenup. 53 pages was a fortress of clauses designed to ensure that I would walk away with nothing if the marriage ended. "This seems extensive," I said. "Marcus comes from considerable wealth. We need to protect his interests." Eleanor's smile didn't waver. "Surely you understand. A girl with no family, no resources, no connections, you wouldn't want anyone to think you were marrying for money, would you?" The insult was wrapped in silk, but it was still an insult. "Of course not." "Then sign it. Tonight. Before the engagement goes any further." I looked at Marcus, who was sitting beside me, his face carefully neutral. "You want me to sign this without reading it?" "It's just paperwork," he said. "Mom and Dad's lawyers drafted it. It's all standard stuff. Standard stuff that protects your interests. What about mine?" "What interests?" Eleanor laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "You have nothing, dear. Nothing to protect. Nothing to negotiate. You should be grateful we're allowing this marriage at all." I felt something shift inside me. Not hurt. Not anger. Clarity. This was the test. Not my test of Marcus, his family's test of me. They wanted to see if I would sign away my rights without question. They wanted to confirm that I was desperate enough, grateful enough, powerless enough to accept whatever terms they offered. They thought I was an orphan with nothing. They were about to learn how wrong they were. But not yet. I picked up the pen Eleanor had placed beside the document. "You're right," I said softly. "I have nothing to negotiate with. Nothing to protect. I'm just a girl with no family who got lucky enough to catch your son's attention." Eleanor's smile widened. I signed the prenup without reading a single word. Page after page, my signature flowing across the lines, accepting whatever terms they had laid out for me. When I finished, Eleanor took the document with visible satisfaction. "Wonderful. Now we can move forward as a family." "Not quite." Richard Morrison spoke for the first time since dinner began. His voice was deep, authoritative, the voice of a man accustomed to controlling every room he entered. "There's one more thing we need to discuss." He looked at his son. "Marcus, tell her the real reason you proposed." The room went very still. I watched my fiancé's face, watched him try to maintain his composure, watched him glance at his parents for guidance, watched him realize that he was being forced to reveal something he had hoped to keep hidden. "Dad, I don't think, tell her. She signed the prenup. She's committed now. She deserves to know what she's committing to." Marcus swallowed hard. "Vivian, there's something I should have told you earlier." "What?" I'm not marrying you just because I love you." I waited, my face carefully blank. "Our family is facing some financial difficulties. The kind of difficulties that require creative solutions." "What kind of creative solutions?" "My father made some investments that didn't work out. We're leveraged badly. If certain creditors discover the extent of our exposure, we'll lose everything: the house, the club membership, our reputation." "I don't understand what this has to do with me." Richard leaned forward. "What it has to do with you, Miss Okafor, is that we need a wife for Marcus who won't ask questions, who won't expect a lifestyle we can no longer afford, who won't have family members poking around our finances." "You needed someone disposable," I said quietly. "We needed someone manageable, someone grateful, someone who would be so thrilled to marry into the Morrison name that she wouldn't notice the name is all we have left." The prenup I just signed ensures that when the house of cards collapses, you'll take the fall with us. As Marcus's wife, you'll be liable for debts you didn't know existed. You'll be tied to a sinking ship with no way to escape. I looked at Marcus. "You proposed to me knowing this? Knowing you were trapping me in your family's financial disaster?" He had the decency to look ashamed. "I didn't want to. They told me I had to. They said an orphan girl with no connections was perfect. No one would come looking for you if things went wrong. No one would come looking for me. That's what Mom said. She said girls like you disappear all the time. No family to file missing persons reports. No lawyers to investigate. Just gone. The words hung in the air like poison. They had chosen me because they thought no one would miss me. They had crafted a trap and baited it with love and marriage and the promise of belonging to a family. And they thought I had walked right into it. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation, the elaborate scheme, the 53-page prenup, the casual discussion of making me disappear, it was too much. Eleanor frowned. What's so funny? You are. I wiped tears from my eyes. All of you. You spent 2 years investigating me, planning this, setting up the perfect trap for the perfect victim. And you never thought to actually verify my story. What do you mean? I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I told you I was an orphan. I told you I had no family. And you believed me because it was exactly what you wanted to hear. You lied to us? I tested you. The same way I tested Marcus. I wanted to see if he loved me for me, not for my money. Turns out, he was testing me too, seeing if I was vulnerable enough to exploit. I dialed a number and put the phone on speaker. Okafor residence. Hi, Mom. I'm putting you on speaker. There are some people here who thought I was an orphan. Eleanor's face went white. Vivian? My mother's voice was warm, concerned. Is everything all right? Your father and I have been waiting for your call. Did the Morrison family meeting go as expected? It went exactly as expected, Mom. They laid out their plan to trap me in a fraudulent marriage to cover their financial crimes. They even discussed making me disappear if things went wrong. Silence on the other end. Then my father's voice, cold and controlled. They said what? Mr. Morrison suggested that girls like me, orphan girls with no connections, disappear all the time. No one to file missing persons reports. I see. My father's voice had taken on the tone he used in boardrooms when someone had made a very serious mistake. Mrs. Morrison, Mr. Morrison, this is Chukwuemeka Okafor. You may recognize the name from various financial publications. My family's hedge fund manages $4.2 billion in assets. My daughter is not an orphan. She is my heir. Richard Morrison's face had gone from white to gray. Mr. Okafor, I don't know what your daughter told you, but my daughter told me everything. She's been wearing a wire for the past 2 hours. Every word you've said has been recorded and is currently being analyzed by my legal team. A wire? That's illegal. North Carolina is a one-party consent state. Vivian consented. Everything you said is admissible. Marcus was staring at me like he had never seen me before. You set us up. No, Marcus. You set yourself up. I just gave you the opportunity to show who you really are. I stood, gathering my things. The prenup I signed? Worthless. My lawyers will argue duress and fraud. You can fight it, but you'll lose, and the legal fees will accelerate your financial collapse. You can't do this. I can do anything I want. I have resources, connections, and a family that will burn your world to the ground if you try to retaliate. I paused at the door. You wanted to marry a girl with no family because you thought she'd be easier to control. Instead, you tried to trap the daughter of one of the most powerful families on the East Coast. I looked at Marcus one last time. I loved you. I really did. I wanted you to be real. I wanted this to be real. Vivian, but you're not real. You're just another man who saw a vulnerable woman and thought she'd be easy to exploit. The only difference is you were willing to let your parents discuss making me disappear. I walked out of that dining room, past the oil paintings and the crystal chandeliers, past the waitstaff who had heard nothing and would remember nothing. Behind me, I could hear Eleanor Morrison's voice rising in panic. I didn't look back. The investigation was swift and merciless. My father's legal team descended on the Morrison family like a precision strike. Within 48 hours, they had uncovered the full scope of the financial fraud, embezzlement, securities violations, tax evasion, and a pyramid of debt that made their situation even worse than they had admitted. Richard Morrison had been moving money illegally for years, using the family's social position to attract investors he then defrauded. Eleanor had been complicit, using her charity work as a front for money laundering. And Marcus, my Marcus, the man who had claimed to want something real, had been the bait, sent to find vulnerable women who could be married and disposed of when they were no longer useful. I wasn't the first. Investigators discovered 3 previous women Marcus had dated seriously, all of them with limited family connections. All of them dropped suddenly when his parents found reasons to disqualify them. I was just the first one who had passed their screening criteria. The first one who had been deemed orphan enough to trap. The FBI got involved when the scope of the securities fraud became clear. Federal charges were filed. The Morrison assets were frozen. The club membership they were so proud of was revoked when word of the scandal spread through their social circle. Richard Morrison was arrested on a Tuesday morning at his office in front of colleagues who had trusted him with their investments for decades. Eleanor Morrison was arrested that same afternoon at a charity luncheon in front of the women she had considered her peers. Marcus Morrison was arrested last. He had tried to run, had actually gotten to the airport before federal agents intercepted him. The photograph of him being led away in handcuffs made every newspaper in the state. He was crying in the photo. I felt nothing when I saw it. The trials were separate but equally devastating. Richard received 18 years for securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Eleanor received 12 years for her role in the conspiracy and money laundering operations. Marcus received 8 years. His lawyers argued that he was under his parents' control, that he was as much a victim as anyone. The judge was unimpressed. "Mr. Morrison," she said during sentencing, "you deliberately targeted vulnerable women for exploitation. You discussed, on recording, the possibility of making a woman disappear if she became inconvenient. These are not the actions of a victim. These are the actions of a predator." 8 years. He would be almost 40 when he got out. I would be long gone from anything that reminded me of him. My mother came to visit 3 months after the sentences were handed down. She walked through my new apartment, not the small one I had rented to fool Marcus, but a real home I had chosen for myself, in a building I liked, in a neighborhood I wanted to live in. "This is nice," she said. "This is yours." Finally. "How are you doing, really?" I thought about the question. Better than I expected. Worse than I pretend. That's honest. I've learned the value of honesty, especially after 2 years of lies, mine and his. My mother sat beside me on the couch. "Your father wanted me to tell you something." "What?" "He said he's proud of you. Not for catching the Morrisons, though that was impressive. For trusting your instincts. For testing someone before trusting them completely. For protecting yourself when no one else could." I almost didn't. I almost believed Marcus was real. Almost doesn't count. What counts is that you kept your guard up just enough to see the truth when it was revealed. They were going to make me disappear, Mom. They sat at that dinner table and discussed it like they were planning a vacation. I know. And that's why your father was so thorough in destroying them. Not just for the crimes they committed, but for the crime they were planning to commit against his daughter. I felt tears forming. I wanted him to be real. I wanted so badly for someone to love me for me, not for the money. I know, baby. Does that ever happen? Do people ever love each other just because, without calculation? Yes, it does. Your father loves me that way. I love him that way. We were both poor when we met, really poor, not pretending poor. We had nothing but each other and a dream. And we built everything together. How do I find that? You keep being yourself. You keep testing. You keep your guard up until someone proves they deserve to have it lowered. And when that person comes along, when they love you through the tests and the doubts and the fear, you'll know. What if they never come? Then you'll have something just as valuable, a life you built yourself, for yourself, that no one can take away from you. She hugged me, and I let myself cry. "The Morrisons thought you were an orphan," she said softly. "They thought you had no one. But you have us. You've always had us. And you always will." "I know, Mom. That's what got me through this." "What happens now?" I thought about the question. Now I take some time. I heal. I figure out who I am without the disguise. And then, maybe I try again. That's my girl. But next time, I'm going to be myself from the start. If someone can't handle the real me, money and all, then they're not worth my time. That sounds like wisdom. It sounds like exhaustion. But maybe they're the same thing. My mother laughed. Maybe they are. We sat together, mother and daughter, in an apartment that was finally, truly home. The Morrisons had tried to trap an orphan. Instead, they had awoken a lion. And now they were paying the price. A year after the trials ended, I was sitting in a coffee shop, a different one than where I had met Marcus, when a man approached my table. "Excuse me. I hate to bother you, but are you Vivian Okafor?" I looked up, instantly guarded. "Who's asking?" "My name is David Chin. I'm a public defender. I worked on some of the ancillary cases connected to the Morrison prosecution." "Okay." I just wanted to say, what you did was incredible. Not just catching them, but the way you handled it. A lot of people would have crumbled. You built a case that saved other potential victims. I had good lawyers. You had good instincts. The lawyers just cleaned up what you handed them. I studied his face. No calculation that I could see. No hunger. Just genuine admiration. Thank you. That means a lot. I'll let you get back to your coffee. I just wanted you to know that there are people who appreciate what you did. He turned to leave. "David." He stopped. "Do you want to sit down? I could use some company." He smiled. "I'd like that." He sat across from me, this public defender with kind eyes and no idea that I was worth billions. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to test anyone. I just wanted to see where the conversation would go. If this story resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you've ever had to protect yourself from people who saw you as a target rather than a person. Like and subscribe for more stories about truth, justice, and the power of knowing your own worth. We don't marry girls with no family. That's what my fiancé's mother said when she took my hand. I smiled and lied, "I'm an orphan." She brightened. Perfect, no one to ask questions. They laid out a prenup like a trap. 53 pages of clauses designed to bind me to their sinking ship. I signed without reading. Then his father said, "Good. Now tell her the real reason you proposed." Marcus couldn't meet my eyes. "We're facing financial difficulties. We needed someone manageable. Someone who wouldn't have family poking around. Someone disposable," I said. "Someone who disappears easily," Eleanor added. "Girls with no family do." They had chosen me because they thought no one would miss me. They were wrong. I pulled out my phone, called my mother. "Hi, Mom. There are some people here who thought I was an orphan." The color drained from Eleanor's face. "This is Chukwumika Okafor." My father's voice came through the speaker. "My family's hedge fund manages $4.2 billion. My daughter is not an orphan. She is my heir. And she's been wearing a wire. They wanted a girl with no family. They got a girl whose family would burn them to the ground. Richard got 18 years. Eleanor got 12. Marcus got 8. We don't marry girls with no family." "You're right. You never should have tried to marry me."